Yeah, hello. Very warm welcome to all of you, wherever you might be watching us from around the world. Welcome to KDRTV Live. It is 11:25 a.m. here in Minneapolis, Central Standard Time. It is 12:25 Eastern Standard Time here in the United States, and it's 8:25 East African Time. Very delighted to have you on the show today as we engage in yet another interesting conversation around driving a positive diaspora narrative. As promised over the last 2 weeks, we have the honor to have a discussion with High Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori, who was a representative of the African Union to the United States and is joining us live momentarily from Washington. In part, we want to engage this conversation not just only for the immigrants here in the United States, but all African diasporans all around the world, whether you're here in the US, North or South America, whether you're in Europe or any part of the world, and more importantly also those ones who are back in the continent of Africa. We are engaging this conversation where we want to make sure that we drive a positive diaspora narrative to a point where all Africans have their rightful place in history. Obviously, here on KDRTV, we've had conversations with a lot of people. We've had discussions with the professors, so we've had discussions with lawyers, medical doctors, and all people represent their different aspects of the social, economic, and geopolitical aspect of the African diaspora. But nobody else could be better placed to have this discussion other than the very person who has represented the 1.3 billion Africans to the United States, Dr. Arikana Chihombori, who is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. A very good afternoon to you, Madam Ambassador. Welcome to KDRTV. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, my brother. Thank you for having me.
Very good. And before I begin the show and we get to the niche details of the discussion today, allow me say to you personally that I appreciate what you're doing for us and the people of Africa all around the world. And I'm sure people watching here in the US and elsewhere around the world are very thankful for the work you are doing for us and for the next generation.
Thank you for having me. It is a conversation that is long past due, a conversation that must be had.
You are spot on that, and I think that's why One Voice Consortium, under the leadership of Dr. Robert Yulu, standing by, and the entire team here at KDRTV are trying to have a platform for which all of us immigrants and Africans in the diaspora can continue this conversation, not just talking, but also get to a point where we can get into some practical solutions. But let's begin with what's happening around the world, Madam Ambassador, and that is about COVID-19. Obviously, it's changed the way we've done things in the last 6 months, particularly for me and many others of you. We are home. It's affected us personally, professionally, businesses, and obviously even governments around the world have to rethink of how they do things. And more specifically, we, the diasporians, have also to rethink how we use technology as an example to make sure that we continue the conversation. Let's begin from you relative to COVID-19. How are you dealing with this personally and professionally, and how do you think it will affect us, the diasporans, going forward?
Well, personally, for the first time since my childbearing years, I am going to be spending Christmas alone with my husband because my children are not in positions to quarantine for at least 10 days before they come home. So that's big. It's disappointing, but it is a reality. They are concerned about my husband and I. My husband is 74 years old, and so they're concerned about our health. And so that's personally affecting me that way. And of course, when you look at just the diaspora in general, the jobs that we hold, being frontline workers, it's not easy. And then for those who are restaurant workers, hotel workers, a lot of us are in those fields. They have been laid off and have been laid off for months with no hope of getting rehired anytime soon. So I know that's putting a lot of stress on the diaspora communities, just like it's putting pressure on every American and many other people around the world. So it is a pandemic that unfortunately there was no preparing for it. It just descended upon us, and we just have to roll with the punches.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your take. It's also encouraging to hear good news that despite the fact that it's a difficult time, it gives you an opportunity to spend time with the loved ones, which is pretty much what most of us are doing. And I think, as we always say here on the show, while there are difficulties, we also need to look at the positives, and that's what we're trying to do here, make sure we use the technology to drive a good positive, which is what you really have been doing very aptly for quite a number of years. Now, let's focus on the discussion. Obviously, you represented almost 1.3 billion Africans to the United States, if that number is correct. And you have taken time, obviously, to talk to the who is who in the world, whether it's in all political capitals in Africa and elsewhere around the world. What is your quick synopsis of what's happening across Africa, particularly from the social, economic, and geopolitical aspect of it?
Well, I think in general, people must understand that Africa is under siege and has been under siege for centuries. It's like the case of truth and evil, like you heard in our presentation yesterday, when somebody talked about truth being naked because truth clothes had been stolen by lies. So now you have lies who's well dressed, and people are believing lies because the lies is putting on the nice clothes. Whereas truth who is naked, nobody's paying attention to truth. That is really the case of Africa, where the truth is in plain sight, but we are not appreciating it. Africa has been under siege for a long time, and people need to understand that.
So you've represented Africa. If somebody was to give you a chance to really grade Africa in terms of what it's doing socially, economically, and geographically, I think an average of 50, Kenya, for example, celebrated 56 years since independence yesterday. Since independence, if you look at Africa from your standpoint, what grade will you give the African leadership so far?
Well, you see, when you're grading a student, you must first of all make sure you're grading them based on the information that they have been taught, information they are supposed to have mastered. Then and only then can you then give an exam and grade the students. You can't grade the students on information that they don't have a full grasp of. That's the failure of the teacher. So when you look at the issue of Africa, if I may use the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, to my shock and disbelief at the extent to which many people, including non-diaspora, were completely unaware of the fact that France was taking over 500 billion out of Africa every year. That is huge. African Union says, in order to completely build out the complete African infrastructure, we need $100 billion a year for the next 10 years. That was only 2 years takings from France. So when you look at it from that point of view, that people just didn't even know that basic, that so much money was being taken by one country with one movement. There are many other aspects of that pact, that the businesses, the first right of refusal of all businesses, contracts, they go to French companies, mineral resources, natural resources, those companies have the first right of refusal. And then that is only France. That's before you take into consideration what the Germans are doing in their former colonies, what the British are doing, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Belgians. So you have, people just didn't know that. People needed to understand the breakdown of how much money is being taken out of Africa because of pre-existing treaties. The World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, and its unfair trade policies with Africa. Look at Switzerland, Swiss coffee, Swiss chocolates. All that coffee is coming from East Africa. All those cocoa beans are coming from West Africa. When did Switzerland grow that much coffee? When did Switzerland grow that much cocoa beans? And why is the World Trade Organization allowing Switzerland to have all these items labeled made in Switzerland? They're all African products. Our inability to add value to our natural resources in order to create jobs for the Africans. So you have to understand the geopolitics, the international financial structures, the trade policy, international trade policies, and you have to understand how they are skewed against the Africans. So when you look at the lending policies of the World Bank, the IMF, how Africans are given the highest interest rates, and yet the majority of the African countries have never defaulted on their loans. It's just done by design to keep African countries where they want them to be. So when you are grading, you have to look at all that in totality. What I can tell you in summary, my brother, is that tell me one African country that has changed a leader and things changed. None. Because why? The fundamentals have never been addressed. So yes, you can look at it. If I were to be the teacher, I am not yet in a position to grade the children because they don't have the full information that they need.
Good take for that. Well, we understand that from the perspective of the teacher and the colonialist. Obviously, the impacts of colonialism and post-neocolonialism still are very clear in Africa. But look at the position that you did hold. In the African government, yes, there are problems. If you look at the country from the South Africa to the northern part of it, economically they are doing fairly okay. I mean, I look at the GDP, pretty much 1 to 3% growth. That's not very bad. But if you look at it, you assess the situation in Africa, for example. Take Uganda. There's a crisis in Uganda. If you look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, there is a crisis. You look at Cameroon, still it's okay, but still struggling. If you look at Nigeria, Nigeria is crying. There is still a crisis in Nigeria. If you go farther west, you go to Liberia, still struggling. You go to your home country, Ghana, which is really doing fairly okay. It's okay. If you go farther to the Ivory Coast, still there is a crisis in Ivory Coast. In the southern side, it's fairly okay, but we can't say enough about what's happening in the North African side because really recent history suggests that there is really damage that has been done there. Let's focus on the African Union. What was the African Union trying to do so that they can improve the welfare of the African people?
Well, I am going to be very frank with you. If you were to take an analysis of all the decisions that have been made by the African heads of states since 1963, when the Organization of African Unity was created, analyze, and I'm going to challenge you and all the listeners, analyze the decisions that have been made year in and year out. What you will find as a common denominator is the failure of implementation. Many good decisions have been agreed upon by the heads of states, and implementation becomes a problem. What people must understand, the structure of the African Union is such that the AU membership is the 55 African heads of states. And under the AU, which is the African Union, is the African Union Commission. The chairman of the African Union Commission is responsible for implementation of the decisions that have been made by the heads of states. The heads of states agree on a decision, and then they go in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, or wherever the biannual summits are being held. They go back to their countries, and then they're boggled down with issues pertaining to their governments. It is the responsibility of the African Union chair to implement those decisions. That is where the failure has been, and that is where the problem continues to be. Sadly, it is what it is.
So if they are to do something, what specifically do you think they can do to make sure that that implementation is realistic? Is there anything they can do, or we can keep talking and talking?
Well, first of all, we need the right leadership at the African Union Commission. Currently, we have a chair who clearly has no clue. And I'm sorry to say, but then I'll say to his face, I have no problem saying that to him. Some would like to say he's a French agent, and there are many who have told me openly that he is. Even some heads of states are fully aware that he is a French agent. It's unfortunate. But the other issue that we need to deal with is the fact that the African Union is not self-funded at this point. We're working towards being self-funded. Some years up to 90% of the African Union funding would be from donors, majority being Europeans, but we average about 70-75%. The African Union is doing something about it this time. They have now agreed on, the heads of states agreed on a 0.2% levy, where they're going to be levying that percentage on certain goods coming into a country. And so that amount will be sent to the AU before the funds go to the country. They're hoping that when all countries participate, they should realize upwards of 1.2 billion, at which point the African Union will be self-funded. Here comes the problem. So as long as the OAU, which is now AU, has existed, the African Union has been donor funded. So naturally, you can't bite the hand that feeds you. Unfortunately, the hand that is feeding you has no desire for you to be independent. They want to continue to feed you so they can control you. Wherein lies the problem. So we have to also grow up and wear big boy and big girl pants and begin to be independent as the African Union. So when we stand up and call a spade, we don't have to worry about any repercussions because of our position that we would have taken.
Very good, Madam Ambassador. Again, for our viewers who are watching us live, we are streaming live on Facebook. We also, that is on, if you could go to KDRTV Facebook, make your comment there, or if you have any question for Madam Ambassador, we'll be happy to post that question to her towards the end of the show. We're also on Twitter. If you could also tweet, if you have any question or comment, do so at KDRTV Kenyan News. And also on YouTube, we're on YouTube streaming live. If you have any comment, please do so. And as you do so, we request that you also subscribe to the same. So, Madam Ambassador, let's talk to part of what you've done, and I've followed you very closely for a long time. I think pretty much all your speeches, I think I must have watched almost 90% of those you've done. And let's focus on the African diasporans. And I think in many of your speeches, you've talked about, yes, we are not on the table. Sometimes if you're not on the table, they say you're on the menu. But your father said, no, if you're not on the table, you are under the table. Let's talk about a segment of the African population, the children of Africa. Africa worked very hard, took them to school, and then we find ourselves in the West. Yes, there are those who might say they're on the table, but quite a number of us, quite frankly, are under the table. Now, what do you say to African diasporans relative to what you just said a moment ago? What can we do as diasporans to make sure that we bring Africa to our rightful place in history?
The diaspora actually are the only hope for Africa to truly turn the corner. It's very difficult for a businessman struggling to make ends meet in Zimbabwe to think continental. It's very difficult for a businessman in Zambia to trade in his kwacha, to trade with a businessman in Nigeria with his naira. It's difficult to exchange the kwacha to the naira, but rather it's easy for the same businessman to exchange the kwacha to the US dollar, the euro, or the sterling. The same thing with the Nigerian businessman. It was all by design, thanks to the Berlin Conference. The diaspora, we're the only ones who are in a position at this point to collectively look at Africa with a bird's eye view. We have also, in addition to that, the brain drain that has occurred out of Africa over many centuries, starting with the children of Africa being taken out of Africa as slaves, has resulted with an Africa that doesn't have the capacity that it needs to build the Africa that we want. When we are united, over 300 million Black people who are the African diaspora, let me make sure everybody listening, the African Union definition of the African diaspora are all people of African descent living outside Africa, regardless of where you were born. So if you're Black, you are in Africa, and Africa is saying, welcome home. There are over 300 million of us. If we were to take just 1 million, and each one of us commits to $83 a month towards a diaspora fund, for example, that's $1 billion a year. Now let's take 5 million and do the same thing. $83 a month is nothing. I challenge women and say, go to your closet, look how many dresses, shoes, handbags that you have that still have tags on. This is pocket change. Here are those of us in the diaspora that we throw away. We go to McDonald's and we spend $100 without even thinking about it. If we can just have that change of mindset and pull our monies together, the diaspora alone, we can change Africa. We are already changing Africa and sustaining Africa in a significant way through remittances. If you take formal and informal ways of sending money home, continental Africans, that's before the non-continental Africans. Some years we're upwards of 100 billion. We average about 40 to 60 billion. The informal is significant, it's never captured, but figures from World Bank are showing that significant amounts, billions, money is being sent home by continental Africans than the totality of the aid that is Africa by those who have always sought to oppress us and giving us peanuts as aid.
So Interesting. Sometimes, Madam Ambassador, as you talk, I can share the feelings of many people get emotional when you really look at the history of Africa. It's very painful to say so. Let's take a moment, and I'm a student of history, and I read one article by Walter Lodney, if you could read that, and the book is entitled How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. In that book, he says, the presence of the Europeans in Africa was and is the development of underdevelopment. Based on what you're saying, and I know you've been a very sharp critic of the French involvement in Africa and many multi-Western organizations in Africa who are dictating really how Africa should think, not to mention the structural adjustment programs way back that really affected the thinking of African people. And more recently, we have now the Chinese are very present across Africa, dictating the terms for Africa. Do you believe at this point in our history that the presence of these Western countries in Africa, France included, and now recently China, is a continuation of the development of underdevelopment of the African continent?
Absolutely. But now at this point, you could say before our eyes were not open, now our eyes are open. The responsibility is on us to make sure that they come in as equal partners. We don't dictate the development of their countries wherever they come from. They too must not come to Africa and dictate the development agenda for Africa. Now, realize the problem. The people who I really feel could make a difference and where the expertise and the financial resources are the African diaspora. There is a vacant seat that has our name as the African diaspora. We have a responsibility to unite. But because of the self-hate and the lack of trust in each other, we are unable to unite for the purposes of serving our beloved continent. So naturally, we need development. But if we don't stand up and unite, you can't blame the Chinese for coming in and building the power plants. You can't blame the European countries for coming in, and hopefully this time they can actually build the manufacturing industry. The hope is we should be the ones who are going to build the manufacturing industry, the ones who are going to bring the development that Africa, and we need to be on the driver's seat in order to drive the agenda. We don't mind foreign direct investment, but let's make no mistake about it. You don't go to Europe and find black men driving the agenda of those European countries. You don't go to China and find black men and women driving the development agenda for China or anywhere else on earth. It will be a travesty if we can continue to allow these people to drive the development agenda for Africa. We need true ownership. We should not be satisfied by being reduced to workers. The Cape to Cairo highway must be built by us. We must not be satisfied with just being passengers on that train, with just being the engineer, with just being the conductor. No, we want to be the conductor, we want to be the passenger, and we want to be the owner. Now, outsiders can come in and we can join venture, but they must know who is in charge. We want to be able to have true ownership, make our own clothes, but at the same time, own the textile mill. Build our own brick houses, but at the same time, own the brickyard. Ride in the beautiful planes, but at the same time, build the plane, own the airline, and also build and own the airport. I am talking true ownership, something that has been denied black people around the globe, including in Africa. That is what needs to change. And that means we must bring in our own money. You see, as long as you're going to look for funding from those who have sought to oppress you, those who have put a system in place to keep you subservient, then you are not free. Economic liberation is where they got us. Two areas they got us: economic liberation and the mind. They destroyed our mind, they brainwashed us, and they denied access to true ownership of real wealth in a generational way. Let's understand those two and begin to do something about it. So I urge all Africans to come together, bring your little change together. You will be amazed what we can do when we bring our change together.
I like when you finish talking about togetherness, and let's talk about togetherness. As you speak, I'm reminded of a writer in Nigeria, Chinua Achebe, and may he rest in peace. What Chinua Achebe said, that the white man is very clever. He came to us quietly, but he did put a sharp knife on the things that held us together. We cannot act one, we've fallen apart. Madam Ambassador, Is that statement from Chinua Achebe correct today, knowing that where you are right now in Washington, they are representatives of African governments, including the African Union, right? All this time, we're really talking about the different nationalities, but there's not been a major call, for example, from Washington and all those diplomatic cycles to really rally the children of Africa together as much as you are doing. Is that a weakness on our part? And if that is a weakness, is it then easy to say to the naysayers who will say, those ones who share your sentiments and or your school of thought, that it's a genuine effort, but it's a little bit too little too late?
Well, you have to understand the issue of sovereignty. When the Berlin Conference was created, the countries were managed from the capitals of those colonizers, Britain, Lisbon, Paris, and many other capital cities in Europe. And then at independence, each country was given sovereignty. Little bitty Togo, little bitty Benin has the same sovereignty as China, as the US, as Russia, as now European Union United for the purposes of trade. So right there and then, Africans were defeated. So when an ambassador is sent to the US, he can only speak about his own little country. He can only promote his own little country. So the ambassador to Benin, to Togo, to Lesotho, to Eswatini, they can only promote diaspora from that little bitty country. There is no cross promotion, but AU, African Union, can do that, and that's what I was trying to do. And I got into trouble because I spoke my truth. I felt that it was important for the diaspora to understand what was really going on in Africa in order for us to unite. So the African Union, once again, we are dropping the ball. As African Union, it is the entity that should be promoting unity among not only Africans on the continent, but all people of African descent. It's one thing to speak to it. It's another thing to actually actualize it. What is needed is the actualization of bringing together the children of Africa so we can truly speak with one voice.
And I know, Madam Ambassador, talking on that, I'm not sure how much you're able to share on that sentiment about what the effort you're trying to do. I did actually also sign the signatory when you had that crisis from the African Union. And I know one of the questions that really lining up right here is, could you like to share what exactly really happened during that time?
Well, in a nutshell, I believe I was just being vocal, too vocal. I was aware of the complaints that had been filed about 5 months prior to my cancellation of my contract. So I had actually expected a phone call or a letter much earlier, but because I had been made aware of a call that had been made, particularly pertaining to the videos that I had been making pertaining to friends.
Well, that might have happened from Washington, but what I know for sure is that you are in the minds and hearts of pretty much every African and friends of Africa all around the world. So still, that doesn't change the fact that we adore what you're doing. Now, before we get to talk about ADDI for a moment, I think it will be a missed opportunity for us now to talk about really what we are seeing on the screen. Africa has come a long way, particularly when you're talking about the girl child. You have done incredibly well as a medical doctor, very, very successful here in the U.S. You've done well, family-wise, you've done well on the diplomatic cycle of it. So what do you say, given the message you're trying to pass across to the African diasporans, what do you say to the African girl child?
To the African girl child, I say to you, you are just as powerful, as intelligent, as hardworking, as any man on earth, black, white, pink, green, whatever color. You don't need to wait for the man to invite you to the table. Grab your own chair and go to the table because you belong there.
So thank you, Madam Ambassador. So there are tens of thousands of questions that are being queued here by our technical team. And again, for our viewers, there are a lot of questions. Please keep on. Have those questions. We need them. Put them on KDRTV on our Facebook page, comments and questions, that's okay. And then on Twitter and YouTube, if you could as well continue to subscribe, and then we'll have a moment for Madam Ambassador to answer at least a few of those questions. And if she will not be able to answer all those questions, rest assured that we'll forward some of those questions to her and the institute that she's just about to talk. Madam Ambassador, yesterday I did listen to your story, your speech about the ADDI. If you could please share with our viewers what that is and what are its aspirations.
What I was trying to accomplish is during my tenure as the permanent representative of the African Union to the United States is to truly unite the African diaspora, which was part of my mandate. And so I felt that that was the missing link that is really needed if Africa is to build the sustainable Africa that we need. So unity of the African diaspora is pivotal to Africa's development. And when I left the mission, I felt that that work must continue, particularly that we did not have an entity that was representing all of the African diaspora. There is a need for such an entity, which unfortunately it should be the African Union, but the leadership is failing as far as that's concerned. The African Union Commission leadership is failing as far as that's concerned. So ADDI, our mission is African Diaspora Development Institute. I created that institute to be the bridge between the African diaspora and the motherland, particularly at this time because of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Free Trade Agreement. It is important that we unite for the purposes of being on the driver's seat of Africa's continental development agenda. For the first time in the history of Africa, we are now talking about continental development. We are now talking about how do we feed, clothe, move 1.3 billion people. Not Kenya talking about Kenyans and Nigeria about Nigerians, but the continent. It is a new day in Africa. It's a new day that we all must understand the importance of it, the significance of it. This is what our Pan-African fathers were trying to accomplish back in 1963 when they met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Unfortunately, the Casablanca group, who were the Pan-Africanists, there were only 7 countries. They were the minority, so they lost. So the building of a united Africa speaking with one voice has been a long journey, which now with the African Continental Free Trade Area, we're now beginning to see the implementation of what our Pan-African fathers were hoping to accomplish back in 1963. So ADDI is saying we cannot afford to allow this boat to pass us by. Diaspora are not actively involved in the development of Africa because they simply do not know. ADDI, we are going to pave the way for diaspora to effectively participate in the building of a sustainable Africa that we want. ADDI is trying to let every diaspora know that we must own our Africa, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That the building of an Africa that is sustainable, the building of the Africa that we want, is our responsibility and ours alone. Let's stand up tall and let the world know that we are the mothers and fathers of humanity. We are the continent that used to be the center of the world. We are the continent that brought civilization to the world. We are the continent that introduced humanity to the world. We are the true original mothers and teachers of what the world is today. Let's reclaim that place. And for us to do that, we must unite. For us to reclaim our respect as a people, as a race, that means we need to have our economic liberation. A respected Africa equates to a respected children of Africa around the globe. We do not have a choice. We are at a crossroads. Unity is our only option. Let's understand that we've been riding somebody else's train, going in the other people's direction towards their own destination. We need to ride our own train that is going towards our own predetermined, pre-decided destination that for once is going to serve our purposes. Unity, unity, unity. So we're urging everyone to go to our OURADDI.org, OURADDI.org. Sign up. When we have 1 million people, there's so much we could do. The issue of the 6th region, we need to get the heads of states to formally make it an official. So those who are not born in Africa can have their dual citizenship. The issue of reparations, it has to be tackled together, not as different factions from the US, from the Caribbean, from South America. No, the problem started in Africa. We need to link it to Africa's development, and it'll spread out to the rest of the world. The world that we desire, 80% of the natural resources of this world in Africa are untapped. In spite of the colonization and the exploitation, studies are saying they've only taken maybe 10% of Africa's wealth. So there's still plenty. Everybody around the world is looking to going in and continuing to exploit us. We must stop it. We must protect those assets. They belong to our children, grandchildren, and generations to come. Is their inheritance. So ADDI is saying, with 1 million names or more, a minimum of 1 million names, we can move mountains. When we now have a voice, and we can tell the world exactly what we will or will not tolerate as a race, as a united Black people, and particularly as it pertains to the development of our beloved continent of Africa. Okay. We don't mind Friends of Africa coming to join us. We simply ask that they understand that we, the Black people, are on the driver's seat when it comes to Africa, just like they are on the driver's seat in their own countries outside Africa.
Sounds good, Madam Ambassador. And again, for our viewers, if you want your questions answered, please go. You can tweet that on hashtag KDRTV Live, and then we can bring those questions momentarily. And we are aware so that the people watching from around the world, wherever you are, please again use that hashtag, which is KDRTV Live, so that we can have Madam Ambassador answer those questions. 1 or 2, 3 questions I think would be good for her, and again, continue to appreciate what she's doing. So, Madam Ambassador, there is a first question for you from Noel Mbutia Mackenzie. Mackenzie is asking, if you can read that on the screen, is saying, is there any push by African leaders to become one, so they have a stronger trading power locally and internationally?
Yes, which is why I said the unfinished business of our Pan-African fathers, which started in 1963, it is now beginning to be finished through the approval of the African Continental Free Trade Area. For those of you who are not familiar with the African Continental Free Trade Area, it is an agreement that was agreed upon by the heads of states in April of 2018. Implementation is going to be in 2021. What does that mean? That means 80% of the 90% rather of the goods that are going to be traded intra-Africa are going to be duty-free. The boundaries that have kept us, the borders that have kept African countries from trading with each other are in the process of being melted. By now, most of those have already been taken care of. The border issues are being addressed. So they're trying to address the challenges that have kept African countries from trading with each other, thanks to the Berlin Conference. So this is huge. This is why I'm saying the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, it is the biggest and best thing that has ever happened to the continent. And it's important that people understand, and that is why we must unite as African diaspora and pull our funds together and take over these large continental projects that are going to be coming in. We want to build the Cape to Cairo high-speed railway. We want to build the Senegal to Djibouti interstate and everything in between. We want to build and own the major manufacturing that's going to be coming up. We want to build the thousands of airports that are needed in Africa today. There is so much that is needed in our Africa. When we pull our funds together, we can be on the driver's seat. We want friends to come and help. We just want to be the owners, and we want to be on the driver's seat, because Africa is ours and we are going to own it. The only way to do it is when we unite. So yes, we are looking to us uniting as African diaspora and pulling our funds together.
So I think you did mention this, I think, from Bab Jawara. What have you to say about failed leadership? I'm sure that, yes, you were talking about all these great ideas, but failure of leadership could be a catastrophic problem, really, when you're analyzing what is happening right now across Africa. I mean, I did highlight a couple of countries across Africa, including Ethiopia right now. Somalia is in disintegration. What do you say to that? And again, you can combine, Ben, if you could hold on to that question as well. Do we have an agenda for the diaspora who are willing to contribute money monthly plus the leadership, if you could combine those two, Madam Ambassador?
Yes. If you look at the issues that are taking place in all of the African countries, the reason for the failure to deal with those issues are all economic. If those countries truly had control of the economy of those countries, they could make decisions to do something about it. But when your economies are being controlled by the multinationals, keep in mind that if you were a British colony, the majority of the multinational companies that are in your country, they are remnants of colonization. They never left at independence. They're still the same ones who are the major employers in your country. If you try to mess with them, they don't pay taxes, majority of them. They're putting money in safe havens. If you try to mess with them, next thing you know, there's instability in your country. Our governments do not have the control economically that they should have of their economies. Their economies are very fragile. Their economies are dependent on outsiders, and hence they don't have true control. Which is why I keep saying, we can change African leaders like we change clothes. Nothing is going to change until those countries have true liberation, economic liberation. Nothing is going to change. My brother, I can send you back to Kenya right now, and we will support you to be the next president of Kenya. Not a whole lot is going to change. You're going to make some change, but you're not going to bring the true change that we desire until Kenyans can own the developmental pillars of that country. Right now, African countries, that is not the case. The outside multinationals who own and drive the economy are not Kenyans, they are not Africans, wherein lies the problem. And also, if we were to go to countries that have conflicts, if you ever wondered, why is it that for a continent that doesn't have a single gun manufacturing plant, we seem to have endless supply of guns? So if you really want to go to the bottom of what is going on in Africa, you need to follow the guns. Look at all the young men. You don't see white people shooting black people in Africa. It's us shooting each other. Why are we shooting each other? Who is giving us the guns? Some of these people, they have no shoes. They are wearing torn clothes, and yet they're carrying an AK-47 and an M16, and they're covered. They have more rounds of ammunition covering them than fabrics of clothes on them. These people who are giving them these guns, they don't even have the decency to give them a pair of shoes and decent clothes. It is a shame. It is a travesty. Let's understand it for what it is. So for you to then spend your energies complaining about this man who's holding a gun and shooting other Africans, yeah, you can complain about him. Yes, he should not. He should stop doing it. But go back and understand the bigger issue. Back to the issues of the root. Who is creating this carnage? Who is benefiting from this carnage? So until we go to the bottom of that issue, we will always complain about all these soldiers, about all these youths who are going around killing today and tomorrow and next year, because the fundamentals are not being addressed. And this is the issue I'm going to keep hammering on, to say, let's not be thrown a shiny object and we run after the shiny object when the real issues are in the opposite direction. That is what they have been doing to us. Leadership, leadership, leadership. Yes, we have issues. Yes, we need to do better. But in order for the leaders to completely do what they need to do, let's also look at other issues that are keeping the economy from moving forward. Who really owns the economy of each country? Take former French colonies. France has military presence in each and every one of those countries, and they can invade those countries without notice if they feel their French interests are being violated. What kind of power do you have as a leader? Your own country, your own citizens, they don't have first right of refusal of all contracts in that country. Public, private, large, small, French countries to this day have first right of refusal. What power do you have? Your own natural resources, they have the first right of refusal. Your government gets royalties ranging from 12 to 15%. What power do you have? You've given up your finances. You've given up control of your military. You've given up control of your natural resources. What power do you have? What country are you leading? Let's be serious here. Okay. So please, let's wake up. Okay. Let's wake up and understand this for what it is. So don't be thrown a carrot and run after a carrot when the whole garden is behind you.
don't wake up. And I also remind our viewers that you've written a very nice book, 101 Wake Up. If you will mention that as well in a moment. But also another question in terms of contribution towards Africa monetarily. But there are also friends of Africa who are willing to contribute to the well-being of Africa. What do you say to that? In addition to that, if you could take that question also from Anika Lee Grange, who is asking, what are we going to do about African refugees? She says no African should be called refugee and foreigner on the continent of Africa. And then she's saying to you, how are we going to deal with this since we have a lot of infectious and tribal issues that really undermining the development of Africa?
Yes, let me start with the Friends of Africa. We have many Friends of Africa. I have met, certainly living in the United States, many people who are Friends of Africa, and they like to see things get better in Africa. People who truly, truly have a heart for the continent. They were just as ignorant about what's going on in Africa, just like the diaspora. So they too are just learning as the Africans are also learning about what is really happening, about the truth of what is happening in our continent. So Africa 101 is a book that was written to educate the Friends of Africa and the African diaspora about what is really going on in Africa. Because let's face it, everything that's being done by these former colonizers, by those who have chosen to exploit Africa, they must stop and think about the millions of babies who are dying as we speak from starvation. They need to look at that picture from a very realistic point of view. Look at the millions of women who are dying while giving birth to another life. Look at the millions of youth who are committing suicide out of hopelessness and despair. All of it boils down to the exploitation of Africa and the underdevelopment of Africa intentionally. The colonizers, they can say whatever they want. Where is the infrastructure? You've been in Africa for centuries. Where is the infrastructure that you should have built? You have been in Africa for centuries. Where is the development? Shame on you. And yet you are the same ones who want to turn around and say you care about Africa. No, you do not. Stop lying to us. You do not care about Africa. You care about what Africa has. So let's call a spade a spade. And the Friends of Africa, I gave a lecture. I spoke in a class at one of the universities, and one of the students was a Frenchman. And when I finished, he said to me, Ambassador, I grew up in France, and I was always told we Frenchmen were going to Africa to civilize the Africans. What you told us today, he had never heard. I can tell you, I've spoken to many French citizens who are telling me that they were not aware that their government was even doing that. So a lot of the people, they don't know that their governments are exploiting Africa to this extent. So they too need that knowledge and understanding. We have many, many Friends of Africa who will not stand to watch and see the carnage that's going on in Africa. If only they knew. If only they knew. They do not know. So when it comes to, so our Friends of Africa too, we urge them to read africa101.org, go to africa101.org and get a copy of the book. Basically, I'm telling you like it is. This is where we are. This is what the policies they've put in place, what they continue to do, how they have controlled us, how they continue to control us. But at the end of the day, as Black people, it boils down to us to wake up, have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror. Accept and appreciate the fact that you are suffering, not only suffering, but you are in the intensive care with this disease of the legacy of slavery and the legacy of colonization. When we heal thyself from the self-hate and the self-mistrust of each other, then and only then can we begin to truly set the agenda forward for how we can change our circumstances. No one is going to change our circumstances except us. Let's make no mistake about that. If you care about your children, your grandchildren, and generations to come, you must do something about it now. Otherwise, you are leaving them, subjecting them to the same life of servitude, just like we have done. And just like our grandparents and our ancestors have done. Let's be the generation that's going to commit to turn a new leaf. Let's be the generation that's going to say enough is enough. Africa and her children are going to see a better day. Africa and her children are going to chart a new future for Africa, and that we will own the building of the Africa that we want. For those, and the issue about the refugees, again, it all boils down to the economics. A lot of the instabilities that you're seeing in Africa, I often say to people, if you see conflict in Africa, you should always look for the story behind the story. You will never see refugees coming from a country, running away from a country where there are no huge natural resources. Every country that you see where there are issues and instability and conflicts, think again, there is always the natural resources that tied onto it. I remember when Ghana first discovered oil, the common joke was that, when is the coup coming? When is the coup coming? Every time an African country discovers a huge natural resource, there's instability, there's a coup coming in. Before it was coups, they're not doing as many coups anymore. But always look for the story behind the story. Then you will know the truth. But what you're being given is a facade. There's never any country that you see there's conflict that doesn't have huge natural resources. Because while the governments are busy fighting the conflicts and the instability, they're siphoning the natural resources. A perfect story example is, some of you might have heard the story of Margaret Thatcher's son years ago. Him and a team of other white guys, of course, living it big in Cape Town, they came up with an idea of overthrowing the government of Equatorial Guinea, because Equatorial Guinea had just discovered oil. So their plan was to put a puppet leader, who unfortunately was going to be a Caribbean, was a diaspora coming from the Caribbean. So while they threw the country into civil war, they would be siphoning the oil. That was the plan. They made a mistake of stopping in Zimbabwe to acquire some of the ammunition. And of course, President Mugabe at that time had smelt a rat and wondered why these young men who claimed they were going to hunt in Equatorial Guinea needed such powerful ammunition for hunting. And in doing more investigations, he was able to find out that that was a coup in the making. So, of course, when they landed in Zimbabwe, they loaded their ammunition. Just before takeoff, they were all arrested. Margaret Thatcher's son was part of the team that masterminded that plan. And so, had they succeeded at what they were doing, it would have been just another coup in Equatorial Guinea. But a lot of the coups that you have seen in Africa, they did not originate with the Africans. They originated, to a great extent, a natural resource had been discovered and they wanted it. So they created chaos. Or if it's a French colonies, the president was trying to push back against the pact for the continuation of colonization. And so heads of states would find their heads on a chopping block or be exiled, imprisoned, because they were trying to take a position that the former colonizers were not pleased about. Because how dare you try to mess with their ability to continue to exploit Africa? So when you hear conflict in Africa, I urge all of you to think about the story behind the story. We do not need to be having refugees. Refugees are a created phenomenon for the purposes of those who choose to exploit Africa, to continue to exploit Africa. You will not see refugees coming from a country that doesn't have natural resources, significant natural resources.
Good question. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. I know there are a lot of questions for our viewers. Please, again, there are a lot of questions. We may not be able to answer all those questions, but if you want your questions answered, please go. The hashtag is KDRTV Live. Have those questions. We'll compile all those questions and analytics and forward them to Madam Ambassador later. So, Madam Ambassador, there is a question from Professor Peter Ndiangu. He's down in Florida and is one of the founders of the One Voice Consortium. Now, related to that question, he's asking, do you think that the current crop of African leaders have the will and ability to spearhead the change needed to dismantle the Berlin Conference boundaries? But on the same note, as you answer that, what is your view? Where do you see Africa 5-10 years from now?
I think the current heads of states have already started dismantling the Berlin Conference. I urge all of you to read up on the African Continental Free Trade Area. You can see all that is being done to undo the damage from the Berlin Conference, to also open up the borders. We're looking at the approval of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Trade is the first place to begin. When you interrupt the ability of countries to trade with each other, you interrupt economic development. So they felt very strongly that which the Pan-African fathers wanted to do over 50 years ago needed to be accomplished. So trade was the first step in integration of the continent. We also have an African passport, which has now been approved. it's going. The issuance of it is now being given to the member states. So you have to be African born to be a citizen of an African country to qualify for that passport. That's another issue. That's why we should push the sixth region, because it's leaving out the children of Africa who were not born on the continent. But that's a conversation that ADDI, we are going to be continuing to push forward in terms of the sixth region. So yes, we are looking at those things that they can do to integrate us. At least they're making steps in that direction. Now, we got to be realistic. In an ideal situation, we need one single African currency. We need one monetary policy. We need one central bank. We need one stock exchange. We need one military. In a perfect world. But I can tell you, trying to get that done with those who have sought to oppress us, they're going to be continuously interfering with that ability for us to bring those structures that are needed for true liberation and integration of our beloved continent. We understand their challenges. Having a single currency is going to be a monumental task. The heads of states understand that is needed, but they also realize integration alone through trade is going to be, it's a monster. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot, particularly when you look at the fact that they don't even have the intellectual capacity, the expertise that is needed. We have experts in Africa, but they're not enough. The rest of the experts that are needed are in the diaspora. So that's why diaspora must also stand up, and we must take a position and begin to play our part. So it is a monumental task, even just the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area. So allow that to go on, allow that integration at the economic trading level to take place before you introduce another monster, which is introduction of a single African currency or a single monetary policy. But it is part of the development. If you read Africa 101, there's a section on the African Union. I did list some of the plans that the African Union has in terms of development and future integration of the continent. And also you can always go to the African Union website. All of it is there. What's needed, the plans are there, very nicely written. What's left is the implementation. And that's where we come in. A united diaspora, I can assure you, a united African diaspora, we got this. They can actually be coming to us. If we unite, the African Union and the African heads of states will come to us for advice. But we must be financially viable. When the heads of states here, the diaspora, are sitting on 2 billion, on 3 billion, the game is over. The game is over. They will be coming to us. Right now, they just perceive us, like the rest of the world, as poor people who are nothing but noisemakers. We got to change that. We are not poor and we are not noisemakers. We need to begin to put our money where our mouth is.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Ambassador, listening to you as we take the last question from Enoch Onyango, it's an honor to interview, but as I watch you, you're so energetic and really going. In a moment, if you don't mind sharing with our viewers, what really keeps you going? As you answer that question from Enoch Onyango, it is a long question. My biggest worry is that there is very little media coverage to the serious issues that Dr. Chihombori is talking about. I'm from Kenya, and I do not see the Kenyan media cover the AFC, ATA with the same energy they cover U.S. elections. Please, how can this be changed? How can we have a powerful African media to the scale of CNN that can do the work of educating Africans and the African diaspora? As you answer that question, I want to point out to Enoch, we here at KDRTV, that's one of the reasons as to why we are here. Now that we cannot be on CNN or these other news outlets, we said we cannot be, if we're not on the table, we can't be on the menu. And we cannot be under the table. We have to create a table of our own. That's the table that we are creating here. And then, Madam Ambassador, if you don't mind responding to both.
What was the first question again? You gave me 3 questions back to back.
What
what keeps me going?
Yes.
Okay, the first question. The injustices of this world is what really gets me. I am a mother of 5 children, grandmother of 5, and the 6th one on the way. And when I look at my grandkids, I wonder what kind of a world they're going to live in. If nothing is done, it's going to be the same world that I've lived in. I have right now 4 grandsons, and they can easily grow up to be the next George Floyd. That reality for me is what's very troubling. So I do know that what I wish for my children, my grandchildren, is what millions of mothers and millions of Black grandmothers also wish for their children. Injustices to one is injustices to all. Injustice anywhere on earth is injustice everywhere on earth. And so I just feel that when I was given the platform to represent 1.3 billion people in Africa and over 200 million in the Americas, I would have done them a serious disservice had I come to Washington just to drink tea and coffee. I had a choice to make. Either I stay being a medical doctor and continue to serve humanity that way. Otherwise, I was not willing to come to Washington and drink tea and coffee and be mute and misrepresent the people that I have been asked to represent. So I used the platform to speak out, to educate, and to inform. And I felt in my own small way, I was doing something about what was wrong with our race, about what was wrong with our status as Black people around the globe, and what was wrong with what was happening in our beloved continent of Africa. So I'm only doing my part, and having been given the platform, having the knowledge that I have, having the relationships that I have, I feel that very strongly that there would be a place in hell for me if I don't use all that to take us to a different level, to bring the conversation to a different level, because not everybody has been given the opportunities that I have been given. I'm simply saying, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I'm doing my part to share what I know and use what I know and the relationship that I have to pave the way for us to go back home, united, speaking with one voice. What was the second question?
The second question, I think that's Onyango, asking about how can we use the media to drive this positive diaspora narrative. I think the second part of it really appears that African news outlets really talk too much about American elections and others, but they don't seem to talk about pretty much what you're really talking about.
You're quite right, my son. I was in Niamey, Niger. First of all, there was the two celebrations that were held at the African Union. The first celebration was when we got the ratifications that were needed in order for the African Continental Free Trade Agreement to be in force. I was in Addis Ababa. I was expecting some serious fanfare because we finally, in record time, in 13 months, we got the ratifications that were needed in order for the AFCFTA to be in force. There was nothing. I was in my hotel room. I was scanning through different channels. Nothing. Such a monumental decision. There was nothing on the news. When the EU was being formed, people were informed on a regular basis. News channels, television channels, they talked about it long before the EU was formalized. African Continental Free Trade Area, our own media, government media, were not talking about it and educating people as to what this means. Even when we got the ratifications, no big fanfare. And then when we launched it, the AFCFTA, that was in Niamey. Again, I was there, and it was beautiful. All the heads of states were there. The stage was covered with white sheets, and as each item was approved, and, you know, there were some bells and some confetti that flew up in the air. And I thought, okay, when I get to the hotel room, there's going to be a whole lot of stuff on television, a lot of discussion. I get to the hotel room, nothing. Our own media in Africa did not pick it up and run with it. There should have been blow by blow, a year before the implementation, educating the people, letting the people know why this is important, why this is the best thing that has ever happened to Africa. But because the white man wasn't there to do it for us, that is why it wasn't done. Why do we not have our own African news network? It's because we are waiting for the white man to do it for us. That is the disease I'm talking about. We don't think about how can we do it. We are waiting for the white men to do it for us. I can assure you, if white people wanted to get an African news network, it will be done in no time. And we will be so happy to support it. We'll be so happy to put money into it. And we won't even be party to the stories that are going to be shared. So who do we blame? Us. The problem is us. If you want to know what is wrong with the black race, with everything that we know today, look in the mirror. That's where the problem is. It starts with you.
Madam Ambassador, it's an honor talking to you. I know it's been a long session. Obviously, having you on the show is important. There are so many questions that are being queued here, but we will not be able to answer those. We'll try to compile all those questions and then share with you. Maybe in the future we can have that engagement. At the same time, for our viewers who are watching us either across the country or around the world, please feel free to follow us on KDRTV for any news updates in the future. So in a moment, I want to bring in Dr. Robert Shiuri, who is joining us live from Columbus, Ohio. Do we have Dr. Shiuri? And that's Dr. Robert Shiuri. Dr. is the founder and president of the Global One Voice Consortium, who is pretty much doing what you are doing, Madam Ambassador. The essence of his work is really trying to bring all Kenyans and diasporans together so that we can drive what we are calling a positive diaspora narrative. And for that, I introduce here to our viewers around the world, Dr. Robert Shiuri.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori. We are proud of you. And many people may not be saying this to you, but the 1.5 billion Africans in diaspora are proud of your work. They may not have been saying it, but we through our organizations, we are saying that because we know the value and the sincerity that you have been doing for the African continent. And we are especially very proud of you in the work that you've done as the former ambassador of AU in America and in Latin America and South America. So again, as part of Global Diaspora One Voice Consortium and Foundation, whose mission is to improve the welfare and lifestyles of Africans in diaspora, we are very proud of this. One Voice Consortium brings together many organizations that are in various sectors of our life, whether it's in the academia, whether it is in the business world, in the legal field, in the civic education area. So we bring all professionals together to speak in one voice on matters that are cross-cutting. So again, we thank also your foundation, which we are going to work very closely with, because some of the issues and the challenges you've put on our table here are for us to all work together. And so a Global Diaspora One Voice Consortium is going to be joining African Diaspora Development Institute as an affiliate organization so that we can all work together. Because even within our consortium, we have professionals and resources that we can be able to extend to ADDI in this journey of creating one voice for all Africans. I am reminded that within Global One Voice Consortium, we have even people who have their own savings and credit unions, almost similar to banks. So we have structures in place that we can be able to mutate towards ADDI as one of the challenges that you have said of having our own African Diaspora Development Bank. And I emphasize that, African Diaspora Development Bank, so that we can have our own bank that can be able to say something. Because it is only in the when we have that economic independence and economic structures that other people can be able to listen to us. And so we follow very closely what you have said, and I'm going to call our groups together so that we can be able to see how the challenge we can work towards with ADDI on that particular level. I also want to thank KDRTV, Dr. Jeremiah Okari, for such a wonderful interview here, and of course Ben Kibwado in the background, wonderful work in terms of presenting this to the world. We are very, very grateful of this partnership that we have with KDRTV. They are, in fact, our media partner in transforming whatever that we are doing to the world. And I'm sure you know, last week, I think a week ago, we had Professor PLO Lumumba, who was on this particular show, and we'll continue targeting other African diasporas out there to continue in this march of bringing unity. So we will continue tapping their resources and bringing them to this particular platform so that they can also talk in one voice as we move towards all this. So help me here in thanking the entire team here. We've done very well, Dr. Chihombori. We have been challenged with what you have said, and we are going to move forward. And I continue urging our diasporans, read this book here. Read this book. This book is where there is some things that you can understand. Somebody said some times back, if you want to hide some money and some gift to some Africans, hide it inside the book. No more. We shouldn't continue thinking that there's a lot of wealth in books. There's a lot of wealth in books. There's a lot of things that you can know. Even some of the questions that people currently now have, they can be answered in that book that is on the screen. So go to the website that we've just been given, the www.ouraddi.org, and you'll be able to find that book. It can be shipped to your address. So I'm speaking here on behalf of Ambassador because I'm passionate, because I have read it all. I've read this book. It has answered for me questions that I already have. So thank you, Ambassador, and we will continue inviting you some more into this platform some other time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shuri, and thank you, Dr. Shuri, and the entire leadership at One Voice Consortium. And Madam Ambassador, closing, I know there are thousands of people watching from around the world. I'm sure you want to make a closing statement to diasporans around the world.
To the diasporans around the world, my most favorite people in the whole wide world, I know we are the beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated, highly adaptable, and totally indestructible Africans. You're the most hardworking people I know. We can do this. We can unite. We can refuse to continue to have the shackles of the mind. We can unshackle our brains, and we can emerge as the true children of Africa who are committed to take our Africa to her former glory. We can heal ourselves from the mental shackles of slavery and colonization. It takes understanding, it takes appreciation, and it also takes complete utter disgust of the status of the Black race on earth. No one can take us out of this conundrum that we find ourselves in but us. And that means you should have a serious conversation. You and I should have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror. That is where the conversation begins, and that is where the conversation will end. When you go to the boardroom with a colonized mind, when you go to the boardroom with a mind that is suffering from the legacy of slavery, it doesn't matter how high your leadership role is, garbage in, garbage out. Let's heal thyself. They are not using themselves to destroy us. They are now using us to destroy us. The ones they are going to tap onto to destroy us are those Black people who are still suffering from the disease of the legacy of slavery and colonization. We owe it to ourselves to have that camaraderie, the camaraderie that other nationalities and races have. You bring Chinese and white people and Black people and Indians and Irish and Jews together, guess what? There's a certain camaraderie. They just kind of drift to each other. They just naturally support each other. You know, they come together because they realize unity is something that's just normal to them. It just kind of happens. They don't even have to talk about it. But we struggle with that. We struggle with unity. So the healing starts with you. Believe in yourself. Walk this earth like you own it because you do. Walk this earth like you own it because you do. Don't you ever let anybody make you believe you are inferior to anyone. If, in fact, as a black woman, as a black man, stand up tall. You are the mothers and fathers of humanity. As such, you were the first teachers of humanity, especially you women. You were the first mothers of humanity. You were the educators of humanity. So you need to be put on a tallest pedestal. They will not put you on the pedestal. We will put ourselves on that tall pedestal because that is where we belong. And for you to be powerful and stand tall and get on that pedestal with the confidence that you need knowledge and understanding of your history and what these evildoers have done to us for centuries. But that united, we are standing up and say, enough is enough. No more shall we be disrespected for simply being who we are. United, as children of one mother Africa, we are going to stand up tall and we will take over ownership of the building of the Africa we want. We will commit to the fact that the building of Africa is our responsibility and ours alone. Friends are welcome, but they must understand the driver's seat belongs to us, Black people, united. I urge all of you to go to our ADDI.org and sign up, and or go to Africa101.org, get a copy of your book, and begin the journey to self-healing and self-discovery. For when we are truly healed from the legacy of slavery and the legacy of colonization, nothing can stop us. Nothing can stop us. We are completely unstoppable. So to the organizers of One Voice Consortium, to my brother, Dr. Chihombori, and all the board members of this wonderful organization, as well as KDRTV, I thank you all for the job that you do. You continue the good work that you're doing, you will grow up to be our ANN, and Usenet. It can be done. It can be done. All it takes is the willpower and the unity to do it. So yes, we thank you for the wonderful work, and I thank you for giving me this much time to engage with you and to engage with African diaspora and Friends of Africa around the world. Aluta continua.
Can you hear me now?
That's better, yes.
Good. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. I think as you can see the commentary there from people from around the world, I saying many thanks to you for the wonderful job that you are doing. One thing I want to tell you personally, in my household, I have a 6-year-old daughter. The other day when she saw that flyer of you, what she said to me, Dad, she's a princess. Here's what I want to say to you. I think you are a princess. You are a great story. You are a great story for Africa. I think we owe you great. We appreciate the great work you're doing. And one thing, and I promise you, and the guys here in the studio, the executive director here, Ben Kebwato, and our studio manager, who's 17 years old, Collins, are reminding me to remind the world that KDRTV is determined, and I promise that we're determined to make this our CNN. We'll do everything we can, and we have the means necessary to make sure that we use this as a platform for all diasporans to use this so that we can engage constructively to build a better, not diasporans, but also a better future. Madam Ambassador, you're not only a blessing to Africa, but for Africa, you're one of our best gifts to mankind and humanity. Thank you very much. We look forward to talking to you. And again, for our viewers all around the world, many thanks for you. Thank you for being on the show today with that fascinating conversation with one of our very own, our sister, our mother, our neighbor, Dr. Arikana Chihombori. And we really need more of Dr. Arikana Chihomboris in this world so that we can build a better diaspora community and, more importantly, make positive contribution to our motherland, Africa. Always remember to tune on. If you could follow us again on KDRTV news updates of time. We'll be live every Sunday at 10 Central, which should be for East African time. That's 6 o'clock to around 8 East African time, but 10 Central Time to 1 o'clock here in the United States. We'll be having live updates, the different analysis, experts coming on to talk about different subject matters. That's about education, about law, about all matters that really affect the diaspora community. We'll have that, and KDRTV should be your stop shop for all that. Again, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, on KDRTV Facebook. Feel free, like us, comment, give us constructive feedback. We like that. As well on Twitter, follow us if you could. Don't forget also to go on YouTube and subscribe. We need your support so that we can continue growing to build a platform for all of us to communicate. Again, many thanks to Dr. Chihombori, and again to you, Dr. Robert Yuri, and the entire team at One Voice Consortium. Your support is more than needed. And again, I want to thank our studio guys here, Ben Kibwata and Collins, for the great support that you guys are doing here, and we promise to continue doing that. As we head to the holiday seasons around the world, from here at KDRTV, we wish you nothing but the very best. Again, see you again next week on Sunday when we engage in yet another conversation. By the way, on Friday next week, we have Professor Peter Ndiangui from Southwest Florida and Laban Opande, the chairman of the Kenya Bar Association in the U.S., will be talking about why being a male feminist is important or empowering. Join us again next week on Friday at 7:20 Central Time. For now, have a great weekend and a very fantastic week ahead. And don't forget, take care of yourself. It's coronavirus out there. Take care of yourself. Many thanks and goodbye.